Thanks, everyone, for attending today. I'm Ed Barrie. I'm the Chief Product Officer at Treasury, and I'm joined by two former colleagues, George Zinn and Jim Scurlock. I had the pleasure of working with George and Jim several years ago when we were all at Microsoft together, and I can't think of a better training ground in global treasury management than Microsoft. George, how about you give a quick introduction, then we'll pass it to Jim.
Sure. I started at Microsoft, I think the joke is last century, and I fortunately became the treasurer in 2003 and held that position for 17 years. So a lot of both Ed and Jim's experiences together with me going through those times. And literally, we have taken software to a new level in the sense that practitioners are building what we would have wanted when we, previously were actually doing the job. Jim?
Yeah, Jim Scurlock. I've had the pleasure of working for George for almost 14 years. While I was working for George, I led the global cash management team, but within that, I also had a separate team that managed a lot of our M&A transactions for, roughly, 12 years. And so I was with Microsoft for 14. So we've got to see a lot together.
Well, I mean, that was a little self-effacing. So not many people know that we did roughly 24 acquisitions per year, tuck-ins as they called them, that the corp dev people called them. We didn't really feel like they were tuck-ins because it was a lot harder to do the operational piece, and that's what we're here to talk about.
Yeah, that's a good transition. Really, the topic for today is, handling and managing mergers and acquisitions from a treasury perspective. And Microsoft, to your point, George, no stranger to acquisitions, probably a huge leader in it, and being able to tap into Jim's experience in the trenches managing that. So I'd love to kind of hear some of the stories about small acquisitions and large acquisitions, and the process that you went through at Microsoft. And really, what are some of the key lessons learned, and how do you, I think importantly for everybody that's listening in on this, how do you really set up acquisitions to be successful, and how do you build the right relationships? What can you do in advance, and so forth? So Jim, why don't we turn it over to you to just get some perspective around that, and even in your role here at Expedia, Expedia is no stranger to acquisitions, in fact very active in the space. So I know our audience will learn a lot from you today.
Yeah, we just closed an acquisition at Expedia just last week, but during my time at Microsoft, it was fun. I've always thought M&A transactions were the most fun of all the transactions that you get a chance to work on, because when you integrate them, you really get a unique opportunity to redesign the treasury system the way that you would want it to look like, right? And I thought that was been kind of a fantastic thing. I just remember the very first transaction I ever got to work on was the LinkedIn deal, and honestly, I didn't even find out about it. I was on vacation in Rome, and I just saw it on the when I was walking through the streets. There was a newspaper clipping that said, "Hey, Microsoft to acquire LinkedIn, largest acquisition in company history" at the time. And so I knew exactly what I was coming back, from vacation to be able to do. And I think with every M&A deal, they're so different. And I've had a chance to work on, everything from like the smallest deal, which are, typically asset transfers, to the largest stock transactions where you're integrating an entire company. And I think during my time period, George was alluding to it earlier, where, there was a period of time for, I think, 5 or 6 consecutive years, we were doing one acquisition every 3 weeks. And that was incredibly important to be able to do, because you're 3 weeks in and then you're doing another one, another 3 weeks in and you're doing another one. And I think they come so fast that I think it's really important. One of the greatest lessons learned that I had was really ensure that you have a clear playbook. What are all the due diligence questions that you want to be able to ask? How do you want to plan on integrating them? And one of the challenges that we had over time was like wanting to integrate their banking structure almost right away, when oftentimes you sometimes hear from a lot of target companies, let's keep it running the way that they're running. And I think after multiple years, and if you're 2-3 years down the line, it really makes a lot of sense to do that integration as much as you can. And so the great thing is I really had, George's support, the support of our CFO, the support of, our corporate development team. So anytime that we would do an M&A deal, we knew that the treasury function would integrate. And it was, and that really, really helped us set up for success as we were doing multiple deals years and years later.
Well, you're selling yourself a little short there, Jim. Yeah, I mean, he was a maestro of folding in the bank accounts under 24 hours from time of close, which was amazing. And even in situations like Mojang and LinkedIn, where they were going to operate independently, we merged the cash structures immediately. They kept their own emails. I mean, that's how distinct and different they were.
George, and it's a great point. I mean, that was one of the things that we focused on quickly was, and this is where I think a lot of corporates don't necessarily do this as much. And this was one of the best practices that we learned. Oftentimes, post-acquisition, one of the largest challenges that you have are updating some of the bank account signers, updating, the online banking users. I mean, just core things that are normally, core to any treasury function. But these were ones that we integrated right away. And so what a lot of teams don't realize is that, for large deals, you typically have between sign and close to be able to do some of this due diligence. And the term that often comes out is considered gun jumping. You don't want to, transact or pretend like you're operating a company before you actually take over their operations. But one of the key things that you can do that we were really, really able to coordinate with their legal teams, our outside counsel on, is preparing all the banking documentation pre-close. So that way, we're able to update all of our signers. We're able to add ourselves as administrators on the bank accounts. We're able to have visibility to the cash, start working with some of the partner banks to enable some of the SWIFT reporting. So that way on the, the very next day of close, we're able to get those reporting. Now, none of this we would do until the actual transaction signed, but a lot of the paperwork that we were able to prepare was reviewed by the target company, reviewed by us, reviewed by the banks. And so that way, a lot of that due diligence was completed. So that way, on the day of close, everything is executed. And that was one of the greatest accomplishments that we had with LinkedIn after a $26 billion deal, was being able to highlight to George and others, here's the balances that we have for all of their global banking footprint immediately after close. And that was one of the greatest things that we were able to highlight. And that just kept it, so once we set that standard, we kept having to do it again. So for all the other deals, hey, can we keep providing it?
Well, in 2014, when you released, what was it, 7.2 billion for the Nokia asset purchase that night, the hard part, and the reason I mention this is because Entity 4 is really built for this, is where the money has to go. What was the Nokia subsidiary in Africa, Northern Africa, that we had to send funds to as part
Morocco,
of that deal?
2.8 million. I just remember that one specific transaction. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's complicated because you need to know where the money's going from your entity structure. And that was sequential to actually getting that asset purchase closed.
Yeah. It's crazy that 12 years later, I still remember the amount in the country, but yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Good on you. Well, I only saw it because Microsoft wrote down that acquisition last year. So,
well, I think you touched on a really good point there, getting all this documentation that you need to give to the banks prepared ahead of time. And so I think, part of that is a result of having good communication and relationship with the company that's being acquired. Can you maybe talk a little bit, Jim, about how
Jim's got a good perspective on that for sure.
Yeah. How do you go about building that trust, that relationship, and get that information sharing going?
And it's one of the most important things. I mean, at the end of the day, any M&A transaction, it's very emotional for both sides. Oftentimes the acquiring company doesn't know, are they going to have a role? What's going to happen? And sometimes they don't even have a treasury team. But it's really important to be able to establish a relationship with them. I mean, it's the treasury world is such a small world. And it's really important to be able to foster strong communication and try to set clear expectations, where oftentimes we're not necessarily coming in and taking over operations, specifically for many companies that don't have a treasury. but we're here to be able to help you. And I feel like for many of our transactions, this really, really helped where, and recently did a transaction where the company did not have a treasury function, but we came in and we were able to help them do a lot of the things that they need. So I think being able to foster like strong communication and really build a relationship with them and be able to highlight, hey, here's what we've been able to do, here's where we can help you, I think are incredibly important, because that way, oftentimes, what you'll see for many small acquired companies is it's a bookkeeper, CFO, right? That, they're really focused on like their engineering stack, building out products, building out solutions. Like they finance and other things are kind of more of an afterthought. So for us being able to come in and say, hey, from a treasury function, yes, we have a mature function. Here's where we can help you. It's usually seen as a great sign of, basically collaboration versus, hey, we're going to take over your operations, but hey, how can we be an extension of your team? And that's always something that I try to ask my team to do. At any company, it's like, hey, let's really make sure that we're coming in here with kind of that, that forward, mindset to say, hey, how can we help you support your operations on anything related to banking, anything related to the treasury function? So I think it's really important that you foster like strong collaboration and, partnerships with those teams.
I think you really hit it on the head there about it being an emotional transaction. I've been on both the acquirer side and the acquiree, and when I was at Tableau, which was acquired by Salesforce, and it was also at a very weird time because of COVID and working from home and just a lot of dynamics there. But when you're being acquired, it is an exercise in grace and understanding that everything that you've built isn't necessarily being dismantled, but it has to operate in a new paradigm with the for the benefit of the corporate, right? And so, but it is an emotional one. I think that's a really important point there. Yeah. So let's
some of the greatest people on our team were from acquisitions. Ultimately, I mean, Melanie Canto from Vizio. I mean, she ran the whole show and did everything. And I would say, all right, who does FX? She's like, that's me. Who does the banking? That's me. So on and so forth. So a lot of times, to Jim's point, it's someone that not even in a treasury function, but when she reacted to the fact that we were supportive of what she was doing, and we really wanted to understand her perspective, and frankly, she was being included as part of the deal, it worked out great. I mean, not so great for Ed, because he couldn't get the Vizio font small enough to put all the entities on it. But other than that part, it was good.
Well, going back to the point earlier about Microsoft, doing 24 acquisitions a year, and I think it's important to know that it's not sequential, right? There's multiple in parallel, and it's kind of like the Olympic track meet, right? Everybody's going down the bank of the track at different speeds, and things are speeding up and slowing down with each individual one. So how do you coordinate and manage all of that, Jim? And George, like how do you? It's a big project management effort for sure.
I think the project management skills were the number one thing that we had to teach. I think having clear visibility and clear plans, I thought were incredibly important, because you're not just talking to the target company, you're talking to a lot of internal teams. You're talking to the teams that are releasing the wires, the teams that are setting up the cash concentration structures, the teams that are supporting the banking activities, managing foreign exchange. Like, all of a sudden these companies that are, maybe USD or non-USD functional companies. So being able to like properly communicate what the exposures are. There's a lot of individual teams that have a dependency on you. So making sure that you're able to, once you do any transaction, you're properly documenting it. And I thought that was incredibly important. So anytime you would do a deal, it's like, hey, let's put everything down. Let's put everything in writing and get all the teams together. And sometimes you'd get meetinged out, right? But it was important, like as you're doing a lot of these deals, but it's being able to properly communicate as fast as possible the right information to the right teams, because there's an economic impact to all these items. And you're absolutely right, Ed, they don't all come at once. I remember there's been multiple times where, sometimes before, like a lot of the gaming studios would announce, like they'd have this large gaming conference. And so like you'd see a lot of the gaming studios go out and acquire 4 companies in 1 month. and all of a sudden it's like, hey, next month you have to try to figure out how to integrate all 4 at the same time. So sometimes they don't come all at once, right? Sometimes there's lulls, and that's just something you only you have to be able to manage for. And so it was tough, right? Because you go through periods of time where you're trying to integrate as fast as possible. Sometimes you've got a little bit of a lull, but I think it was really important to make sure that the teams were always focused on the end game of like, how do we integrate, being able to provide a lot of the updates, because there's always there's a lot of baggage that comes with all the M&A deals, and it's just making sure that you have full visibility to like literally every work stream.
Oh, absolutely. Jim was a pro at making sure we were not exposed, and I believe this is something that will be on a go-forward basis helpful to others. We were not exposed to a regional banking infrastructure where we had more than 250,000 in deposits at those places, and that was huge, because 250 is the threshold post the global credit crisis that the FDIC insured bank deposits. But a lot of people got, whatever you want to call it, offsides, with Silicon Valley Bank when they were going under. And the only thing that saved them, because they had more than 250K, which was not FDIC insured, is that they made an exception for them. So a lot of that sweeping immediately is really risk management that people don't appreciate until the bad thing happens. Yeah,
absolutely.
You mentioned a lot of the baggage that can come along with an M&A deal. Are there any particular surprises or memorable things that you discovered as a result of an acquisition? I remember one acquisition I was involved with where the target company had a bank security box like you see in the Bourne Identity, and we had no idea what was in there. It was up in a bank in Edmonton, Canada. So no one knows what's in that box to this day. So any memorable items like that?
And no joke. Just a couple months ago, I had to drill into a safe. Very, very similar thing. Similar lockbox. I felt like I was in the Bourne Identity, right, or Mission Impossible, like drilling into a lockbox. I'm like, okay, like what is in this thing? I think there's always fun things in all M&A deals. We've had some of them where more corporate treasuries are a little bit more diligent on who their signers are or what legal entities we've had. We've also acquired, over my years, I've also seen where we've acquired companies and they had acquired companies and they didn't, when we acquired them, didn't even realize that they had acquired companies. And so like this has popped up like multiple times over the years where I'm like, hey, how would you not notice on your financials that your company has, other companies that you did not acquire? So those are always interesting. Also, constantly finding out bank accounts that weren't previously disclosed. I think that's always kind of a key one, and I think that's something that I always do on any transaction. It's really tying everything out to their general ledger and identifying an account. And I think in my career probably found maybe 30-40 different accounts that were never previously disclosed. So that's never a fun thing, especially considering like you spend so much time and effort to controlling the cash, managing the cash, and all of a sudden you find out you've got a new bank account. That's never ideal.
Well, I remember one, and Jim, you may recall. So basically, in parts of Asia, the signator is not the actual signature block. It's called a chop. And these chops are these exactly things that you would, medieval sort of stamping of an insignia. And apparently the company we acquired had lost the chops to their bank accounts. And, that didn't ever get unraveled as far as I can remember. Jim, help me in terms of...
Nope, it did.
So you couldn't actually access the bank account.
Yep.
Because we didn't have the chop, the physical thing that you'd stamp. So it was kind of funny.
And you have no authority to close it. You have no authority to do much. Yeah.
Yeah, I had a similar experience with that. And I was thinking about the finding out about bank accounts after the fact. And then if they're non-US, then that has the potential to impact even your FBAR filing. Do you have to do an amended FBAR, right? Just like all these tentacles, unintended consequences that fall out when everything's not known up front or kind of discovered after the fact. So those are good ones, good items there.
Well, how do you RIF? Not to turn this into a marketing thing, but the RIF, we have incorporated our FBAR XML straight to FinCEN for practitioners for their in conjunction with their 1040 filings in our winter release here. So folks should, at a minimum, think about looking at that as a concierge service, even if they're not interested in Treasury 4.
Yep. Good point.
Because it's a personal filing. It's not the corporate's responsibility when you're a signatory on those international accounts that are greater than 10K USD equivalent annually.
Yeah. That's the whole FBAR reporting. As we say, the FBAR is the biggest four-letter word in Treasury because it's just, there's all sorts of nuances around it, and people struggle with it, right? It's the last thing that anybody wants to work on because it's a necessary regulatory reporting requirement. Going back to relationships, Jim, how do you then maybe think about or share some insights in both? You've talked about the acquired company that you're acquiring, but also just internally within your organization, the tax team, corporate legal, investor relations, and so forth. Maybe share some experiences and thoughts there.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that you build over time, right? It takes a long time to build trust. It also takes a long time to build a good relationship, and I think that it occurs over time. And I think that was one of the things that was beneficial after having to do so many M&A transactions. You build a rapport with the financial accounting team or any of the accounting teams that are supporting the operations. You're building trust with the corporate development team. I remember, oftentimes one of the things that I often hear is that oftentimes Treasury teams don't know about an acquisition until it's really too late. Over time, I was able to build a really solid rapport with our corporate development team. So every month we would sit down and review, hey, what are all the different M&A transactions that are coming? Which ones have been, are you in the process of negotiating? Which ones you're only in the fact finding state, right? And so it's really sitting down with that team ahead of time to really be able to forecast what do you think are your cash flows, but also getting a sense of what the scope of what you're looking to acquire early on, so that way you're at the seat of the table when you're trying to develop a funds flow memo and determining do you need escrow agents and other things. And so it's really having that rapport, and I think that's super important, so that way, but again, it's something that occurs over time. It's not something that you it's not taken for granted, but it's really things that you build.
No, I mean, you did a tremendous job getting in, whatever you want to call it, in the circle, because, for us, the 13-week, cash forecast was huge. And a lot of times, one of those would come out of the blue, and, typically they were for stock because people were trying to manage the tax consequences at the target. But when you have a blip of a cash thing, that was just, something that you can't plan for because it's so binary when one of those closes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, going back to, you just made a comment, Jim, about the flow of funds, and understanding that. I think that always begs the question about how do you manage the validation of who you're paying, and so any kind of best practices you'd want to highlight there for organizations.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So, Ed, I think one of the key things is validating it. So we would get wire instructions from our corporate development team. But secondly, we would do a callback on each one of those. And, one, we definitely guarantee that we're getting it on letterhead. But two, get a callback. And then secondly, depending on if it's a new counterparty, do a test wire. And then, we'll do a small test transaction and then after the close, then they would immediately return the small proceeds. But when these are such large dollar amounts, and you typically, other corporates unfortunately have been subject to fraud in this area, it doesn't hurt to double check, right? Because once the money's out the door, it's out the door. And you really want to just make sure that we do that. And so I think setting up that precedent where you're doing a small, test transaction and doing a callback, yeah.
That's fantastic. I think that actually goes a long way, especially, it might be viewed as a little bit of a friction or manual effort by somebody, but to your point, the dollars and the value are so big, it's worth that extra effort.
Well, if you think about it, you do a test transaction in Venmo for a couple $100 thing.
Yeah.
Think about order of magnitude when we're talking B's.
Jim, any final thoughts you'd like to share on M&A and, from the Treasury perspective, best practices?
Right. I think the key thing is just, try to integrate as fast as possible, because you never know when the next one's coming. But, and again, continue to build rapport with a lot of your key stakeholders. Again, at the end of the day, all of us in Treasury, it's a relationship game.
Well, thank you everyone for joining this session today. Jim, thank you for taking time out of your day. Really appreciate your insights. Thanks, George. And with that, we'll wrap it up.